To go with this wide range or diversity of benefits that we might want to measure, that requires several inventive and techniques. We have a wide range of tools that economists have busily researched and invented over the past several decades. Many of these are in fact admissible in court proceedings and so forth. So they're not just things that we make up as we go along. They're things that have been tested and vetted and are accepted in cost-benefit practice. Now, some of them are more novel than others, and others are more well-established. The first one is the property value method. Imagine you have, there's a house that you're interested in buying, and across from there is a terrible polluting factory. Well, that might decrease the value you're willing to pay for the house. But if it's a lovely wetland that you'd like to see or perhaps hike in, and it's there, that will increase the property values. And so we talked about amenity value before. That will be what we call capitalized into the price of a house that's nearby. So that's just going to give us one technique. We can look at how the environmental benefits are associated with property values. A second technique is what we call choice experiments. These are just where we, in a clever way, in a careful way, we ask people what trade-offs they're willing to make between, of course, they have to pay money. It costs money to preserve environmental benefits, but on the other hand, we get those benefits. And so we give them policy scenarios. Suppose there were a policy that might cost your household $10 a year, for example, an increased price of goods and services, or even in a tax, but it would give a very nice wetland nearby. And so we asked, would you be willing to pay that, or would you vote for such a policy? And then using their responses, we can infer the values they have for that. A third method is the value of production approach. Wetlands, for example, if we think about the filtration services they provide, that could alternatively be provided through man-made facilities, which could be quite expensive. A good example of that is the Catskill Mountains in New York provide most of the water filtration service for the New York water supply. And so instead of having to put in a massive treatment plant, they rely on the natural capital. The cost of those services, the cost that it would take to provide those services artificially can be used to help value the service that's naturally provided. A fourth category of benefits is the impacts on health or even the risk of death of the services that wetlands can provide. For example, in a developing country context, people might be drinking water from the natural environment, and it might be risk either due from germs or pathogens or from pollution in the natural waterways. And the filtration services provided can help improve health and reduce the risk of death from those problems. They also provide cooling, and that can be important, particularly in heat waves, where there is a certain risk of death, and particularly among the elderly or the sick, and it improves the health. And so we can measure these things and then try to quantify the benefits. Another approach, and this is a newer one, is the life satisfaction approach. And the idea here is that we have surveys often occur, not of everyone, but a random sample, of how satisfied are you with your life, or how generally happy are you. And in many cases, there's an association between environmental quality of people's life and their life satisfaction. And this is not just an artifact that happier people go and live near natural environments, but you can actually see changes over time as there's natural variation in environmental quality. So the life satisfaction approach tries to take those observed changes in self-reported satisfaction measures and relate those to the changes in life satisfaction that occur with changes in income. Right? And so say, well, you could either have a bit more money or you could have a bit more natural habitat. And those would generate perhaps the same amount of satisfaction benefit. So that gives away a different way to quantify the benefits. Having discussed these 6 approaches, let me present 3 particular case studies just to solidify the understanding. Recently, in 2009 in Perth, Australia, there was a study done of using the property value method to try to assess the benefits, or at least a portion of the benefits, of urban wetlands. And the approach there was they took a range of sales prices of houses. They looked at houses that were very near the wetlands so that they could look out, or they could, in a short walk, enjoy the benefits of the wetland. And they compared those to property values that were a bit more remote, so they probably didn't get too much direct amenity value. Of course, they controlled for a whole range of other factors. They found that urban wetlands has produced $140 million Australian in terms of increased housing prices or housing value. A second example from choice experiments, which again is essentially asking people in a clever way, in a careful way, the trade-offs they're willing to make between their money and the benefits, found that households in the northeast of the United States were willing to pay $50 US per household per year for a variety of services produced, such as pollution control, flood control, and water supply protection. A third example is a study using the value reduction method. That's in Louisiana. Up to $5,000 per hectare per year of filtration services provided by the natural wetlands, avoiding the need to put in a wastewater treatment plant. Now, how do we put this all together, given that in many cases there's not sufficient time or money or expertise to do one of these original studies for a particular sort of small-scale decision? So the approach there is to use what we call benefits transfer. And the idea is to take the benefits measured in a different context, perhaps a different city, and transfer those benefits to the new context, the decision that you're trying to make. And of course that's imperfect, but some information is better than none. And oftentimes we don't need a perfect answer for cost-benefit analysis. What we need to know, do the benefits exceed the cost? And so we have a bit of a fuzzy measure of the benefits. The reasonable range might be enough that we're fairly sure, we're fairly confident in the answer. Right? So by using this benefit transfer technique, we can get reasonably good guesses or reasonably good estimates by going and looking in essentially the library of studies that have been done. There's hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of studies done of all sorts of different benefits relevant to the urban environment, the urban water environment. Okay, so this gives us a practical solution that we draw on existing studies to get a plug-in value. For example, I gave a minute ago $50 per hectare per year in wastewater filtration services. So if you're in a situation that is comparable to that in Louisiana, in terms of the amount of pollution being controlled for, the population being affected and so forth, you might be able to adapt those figures to your local context. So the key is to scale for differences, population size, area, perhaps income, other demographic factors, so that we get the most reasonable transfer that we can.